Welcome to the chat, New Bedford Lights Community Forum. This is Jack Spillane, and today we're going to talk about what has been the biggest issue in New Bedford the last 2 or 3 months, and that is the abrupt closure of the College of Visual and Performing Arts in downtown New Bedford at the Star Store. My guests this afternoon are some of the long-term players in the city who were here when the Star Store first the idea came about. Former Mayor John Bullard, former city planner Richard Walliger, former Mayor Scott Lang is also going to be joining us, but he's been delayed in court a little bit. And last but certainly not least, Fallon Navarro, a Master of Fine Arts student in ceramics at the Star Store, who has really been sort of the courageous voice of the students this last 2 months, when they were told 2 weeks before the semester began that their downtown New Bedford campus was essentially closing, with all their studios and all their equipment and everything else abruptly taken away from them. It still hasn't been returned to them. Almost 5 weeks into the semester, they're about to have midterms and they still haven't gotten into their studios. So welcome all.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start today asking, it seems to have gone quiet among the public officials in the city. You really don't hear much from them anymore. Senator Montigny, almost a month and a half ago, said that he had asked Governor Healy to look into it, and we haven't really heard anything from her since then. There's all kinds of rumors around town that they should use the building for artist studios, or maybe the gallery could open again, but nothing about the school returning. My question is the issue over, Mayor Bullard?
I don't think the issue is over. I don't know how it will turn out. I understand the mayor is still working on a solution for this. So I don't think people have given up on this issue at all.
Fallon, how important was the studios being in downtown New Bedford? Why was that important to the students?
Well, I think all of us, we chose to come here because of the special relationship between the Star Store, the facilities there, and downtown New Bedford. On the website, it was sold as being this thriving art community, and by coming here, we would get to be a part of that. So I think all of us, when we came here, we were coming here with the expectation that we would get to be a part of New Bedford.
And where are you at now? You still haven't gotten into your studios. You had a protest Saturday. You still haven't gotten your meeting with the Chancellor. What sort of state? What kind of? I mean, you must be having a terrible semester, I imagine.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, especially for me, this semester has felt like a complete waste. We are spending maybe 40 hours a week plus working on advocating and trying to get the university to just give us the respect we feel like we're paying for, because the Bed Bath & Beyond is still not ready. It does not have any of the equipment we need to use. And we just last week found out that painting can no longer even be in the building because it doesn't have ventilation for oil paint. So I think this semester for us, we're not doing anything.
A little bit of breaking news. The Chancellor did meet with the painting students this afternoon, but the rest of the MFA students were not invited. So I hope it's not a divide and conquer thing that's going on there.
Well, the painting students all reached out to me already, and I knew that they were going to be there in the meeting. And, you know, I didn't know that the Chancellor was going to be there because no one ever knows what he's doing, at least at our level. So I think they may try to divide us, but on the letter, it's all of our names. We all stand together.
Richard, you've been around New Bedford, or were involved in New Bedford, really when the revival of New Bedford started. You've done some research on arts campuses and art schools and interest in them. There's been a lot of talk that students don't want to major in arts anymore, and that you know, the university needs to move into more practical areas. Tell us what you found about our schools.
Well, there's a few lines of thought on that whole issue, but the most important one that I saw was from Gray Associates, and they do a lot of consulting with colleges in terms of admissions and strategic planning for their student population. The 25 top art high schools in the country, 7 of them are in the Northeast, 2 are in Massachusetts, and 12 of those 25 are on the East Coast. So, you know, my question is, to what extent is the university recruiting from these art high schools? And I don't know how many total art high schools there are in the United States. We were just able to get some preliminary information. There's also 4 very noted schools in New Jersey, Massachusetts, Maryland, and Hartford that also make the list. Not to mention the high schools in the general region and in New England. There are a lot of kids studying art in high school, a lot of kids that are interested. What kind of marketing is being done to bring those students in? The other issue is that the art is a very attractive major at the present time, contrary to some of the comments that I read in your articles. Art history is up 16% from 22 to 23. Illustration is 7%. Fine and studio arts, which includes things like sculpture and ceramics, that's up 7%. These are numbers of students that have enrolled between 22 and 23. Digital arts are up 11%. And there's a whole issue about digital and electronic arts versus the plastic arts that I would call. One of the people in your column talked about the fact that the Star Store had these large kilns that aren't available in many schools, also weaving and metalworks. These are things that make the Star Store unique as an art establishment. And he said that, you know, at some point, the trend will go back to the traditional and fine arts. And the other thing is, why don't you combine the electronic and digital arts with the classic arts? You put those kids together, who knows what will come from having those disciplines in the same building, talking to each other, working with each other. So I think one of the things that the city could do to try to move this along is to work with the university to market New Bedford as a arts city. Now, Fallon mentioned that she saw some mention of New Bedford being an attractive arts community. I think the city already has virtual tours and digital tours of the community. Why can't the city zoom in on the arts and sell the art community to students? They're going to want to come to a place that's hip, that is noted for its arts community. And so that's
I know Mayor Lang has told me that he feels that they haven't done enough marketing. Fallon, you came all the way from Phoenix to major, and I've seen some of your work. You're a gifted ceramicist. Were you worried that getting an MFA in fine arts was not something that would lead to a job?
No, not at all. I think I see a lot of other artists in my field and in other art fields that are graduating with their MFA, and they're working with companies like Google. They're doing work for them. They're working with all these larger companies. They're working with the city. They're doing all these other projects. So I wasn't worried that I wouldn't be able to find a job. I think artists are very resourceful. I may not find a job directly doing ceramics the way I want right away, but I am going to always be able to find a way to make art.
Yep.
Right. It's made that about artists being very resourceful, and that their average salaries are somewhat above the average salary of somebody coming out of school with a bachelor's or master's. And like Fallon said, they're very resourceful in finding jobs in all marketing, digital work and things of that sort.
Yeah, I've heard there's a lot of work for them in video production and
Yep.
things like that. Mayor Bullard, I've had some of the faculty at UMass Dartmouth, much to my surprise, ask me, well, why does it have to be in New Bedford? Why can't they just have their art classes in Dartmouth? We're cheaper for us to run it. What would your response be? Why do the arts have to be in New Bedford? Why can't they just be out at Dartmouth?
Well, I guess, Jack, first of all, congratulations on the way that you've been covering this story, because I think it's a very important story. And that question could be enlarged into why should UMass Dartmouth be in New Bedford, not just the arts, but the university itself. And when I was inaugurated as mayor in 1986, so that's almost 40 years ago, the cities of New Bedford and Fall River and Taunton, the mayors there got together with the then Chancellor of UMass Dartmouth, John Brazil, and there was an understanding, and in conversations with you, I've called it a contract, because that was a very firm understanding that there was a relationship between the economic growth of the cities of southeastern Massachusetts and the university. And like a contract, it was mutually beneficial. That is, educational attainment is critical to the advancement of the cities of southeastern Massachusetts, unlike the relationship of any other university a part of the UMass system. And the city's leadership, political and business leadership, is key to the advancement of UMass Dartmouth. It is a mutually beneficial relationship, and we worked together. When I left the Clinton administration and went to work for Chancellor Peter Cressy and then Chancellor Jean McCormick, that understanding, that contract of mutually beneficial relationship was still in effect. And the president of the system at the time, Bill Bulger, and then Jack Wilson, understood that mutually beneficial relationship, that what is good for UMass Dartmouth is also good for the cities. That understanding, that contract, as I called it, resulted in CMAS, the Center for Marine Science and Technology, later the School for Marine Science and Technology, being located at the south end of New Bedford. Fall River looked at that and said, that's good for New Bedford, what do we get? And then was built the Advanced Technology and Manufacturing Center in Fall River. And what followed then was the Star Store being built in downtown. These were good for UMass Dartmouth. These were good for New Bedford and Fall River, because what they did was to knit closer the university to the cities of Fall River and New Bedford. In New Bedford, the number of people with college degrees is 10%. In Massachusetts, it's 33%. In the nation as a whole, it was 25%. We are going to go as far as UMass Dartmouth takes us. And every time for the 4 years I worked at UMass Dartmouth, when a chancellor would say, how many people are the first in your family to graduate? 2/3 to 3/4 of the people raise their hands. Yes, a few people will go to school at BU or BC or Northeastern or so on, but most of the people in the cities of Fall River and New Bedford, if they're going to get their college degrees, are going to get them at UMass Dartmouth. That relationship is critical, and it was accepted and supported not only by chancellors like Peter Cressy, John Brazil, Jean McCormick, but also presidents like Bill Bulger and Jack Wilson. What's at stake is, does Mark Fuller understand this? Does Marty Meehan understand this relationship? When I was at the closing, what I call the extended intermission of the Zeiterion Theater right across the street from the Star Store about a month ago, for a $30 million upgrade of the Criterion Theater. There were 300 to 400 people literally dancing in the streets to celebrate what the arts mean for New Bedford. It was jubilation of a very diverse but young crowd right next to the Star Store. I looked at that scene and said, if UMass Dartmouth wants to promote enrollment, they should take a picture of all these people dancing in the street in front of the Star Store and say, if you come to the Star Store, this is what you get. People dancing in the street in downtown New Bedford. This is the attractiveness of being in a downtown at night. It's alive. It's alive with young people. And now the main campus at UMass Dartmouth has an awful lot to offer, but it's different from what you get in the Star Store. So the last point I'd make is that when I started work in New Bedford in the Waterfront Historic District in 1974, the first person who came to me saying, I want to live here, was Carl Cavano, an artist.
Yep.
Artists see things before anybody else does, because that's why they're artists. They see value, they see beauty, they come in and they make places cool, they make places safe. And once they come, then other people see what they see. And that's what gets cities to take off. Buddy Cianci came into New Bedford and said it as explicitly as only Buddy could say. He said, in Providence, we use artists like Marines. We send them into neighborhoods so that they will help us revitalize neighborhoods. And then he said, the only problem is we have to protect the artists, because once they make a place cool, gentrification happens and they get pushed out. So the artists have come into the Star Store. They've made the place cool. You know, there are restaurants, the occupancy rate in the buildings went up, and now what's happened? Just like Fallon, right? They're being pushed out. And the tragedy is they're being pushed out by their own protectors.
Yeah.
UMass Dartmouth.
It's just unbelievable.
And that's the tragedy. And I thought I see Mark Fuller in New Bedford a lot. I thought he understood the role that UMass Dartmouth plays in New Bedford, because he's in New Bedford. He's a lot better than the last few chancellors that the university has had. I really have a lot of hope. But you know, when I asked him, do you want to be in New Bedford? He said, well, the Star Store is 100 years old. How can you be in New Bedford without dealing with a 100-year-old building? That's what New Bedford is. That's the beauty of New Bedford. It's all 100-year-old buildings, unless they're 200 years old. Who cares? That's what you deal with in New Bedford. That's what's so beautiful about them. We have old buildings. Yeah,
I initially thought he was more than just a dollar and cents guy, but I'm beginning to think he is. This next question is just for whoever wants to answer it. I had a faculty member at UMass Dartmouth last week tell me very forcefully that the university does not have a role in economic development. That is not the university's role. They are not an economic development agency. And then beyond that, this professor even said that it does not have a particular role with the students of Southeastern Massachusetts. He said at one time it was a regional public university meant for them, but now it's a public research university. It really could be anywhere in the state. It has to be somewhere. It just happens to be in Dartmouth. And I was just flabbergasted that the state university system somewhere around 7 years ago, when they changed their funding system, has now a view of itself as not having any role in economic development, and B, not having any role in terms of remedial education for people from urban backgrounds, serving the geographic area that it's in. I was just astonished.
Jack, that is the definition of an ivory tower, right? That is someone who's disconnected from the landscape in which he exists. That is the farm that UMass Dartmouth was built on, separate and divorced from the neighborhood in which it exists. And if that worldview exists, then the surrounding area that UMass Dartmouth is in will think of UMass Dartmouth as invisible, and support will dry up.
Fallon, where are you guys at with your tuition reimbursement request? You asked for that about a week ago, and we haven't really had much. I heard you had a meeting with the provost, but not the chancellor. Have they made any commitment on that?
No, not at all. I think the only, and I wouldn't even call it a commitment, the only thing they've offered us is, oh, we can give you a fund for some materials. Like if I wanted to get some clay or some things like that. But how does that help me when I'm not even given the equipment to use these materials? And they weren't very clear about how do you apply for the materials? What are they going to cover? And it seems like it's a reimbursement situation of I buy clay, they refund me for that. So we have heard nothing back about tuition. What they offered us was, oh, we'll extend the drop date by 2 weeks. But many of us are responsible for teaching all of the undergrad classes here. We have financial commitments to the university. We have a lot of commitments in that we can't just pack up and leave, and we don't want to. We chose to come here to get an education, and we just want the university to make good on their promise to give us the education.
I am just flabbergasted by that. So instead of saying, yes, we'll consider tuition reimbursement and try to make up this terrible semester that you've encountered, they basically said you can drop out and you won't be penalized. That was their answer to that?
Yes. Yes.
Wow, that sounds like more ivory tower. I just can't believe it. Have you got, I know I talked to you about this earlier. Have you any sense of having a lawyer, talk to them? Because you're not allowed to get into your studios. You are artisans, not allowed to get into their studios in an MFA program. How can that possibly be the education that you paid for?
I think for us, we would, if anyone is a lawyer and would love to help the students, we're looking for help. We need support. We're sort of stuck. We don't know where to go next. We're trying as hard as we can. At first we tried to work with the university. We put trust in them. We said, okay, they're going to move us out of the Star Store, but they said they'll keep us in New Bedford. And then all of a sudden, we're not in New Bedford. We're in a Bed Bath & Beyond. And they say, we'll have immediate studio access. We put our trust in them again, and then no immediate studio access. And at this point, we feel like the university isn't answering us at all. We've had an easier time meeting with governors, mayors, senators than our chancellor.
It's just astonishing. Richard, you were involved when New Bedford just was at the beginning of its revitalization efforts. How important was the arts in the turnaround of New Bedford?
Well, it gained importance as time went on. At the very beginning, three critical things happened. Mayor Markey was elected. Richard Nixon established the Community Development Block Grant Program, and John Bullard came home and started what he called the individual collective urban renewal with Whale. And as that gained momentum, there was a lot of money and sweat equity and just desire to get things moving. But as we gained momentum, going up the hill, you saw Freestones. You saw these antique stores start to emerge from the historic buildings. And then one of the critical things that happened was Wales saved the state and converted it into the Zeiterion Theater. I thought that was tilting against windmills when John came in to ask help from me to sign some legal documents. But it proved to be a very critical point in the downtown's development because people finally saw that the arts could attract a lot of folks, not only from surrounding areas, but from New Bedford itself, that people were hungry for that kind of cultural institution, that artistic institution. But the critical point was the Star Store itself. We had visions back in the early 70s of what downtown could be. There was a lot of vacant space. The historic buildings had their problems. What we tried to imagine what downtown could look like with lofts, with retails and restaurants and all that. That didn't happen until the Star Store came into existence. The Star Store is like the keystone of an arch. When you pull that keystone out, the arch starts to collapse. A better metaphor, I think, is the Star Store as the heart, the beating heart of a revived downtown. You've got these kids in there who have ideas, who have new ways of looking at things, who have energy, who have entrepreneurial skills. And when the Star Store hit, the downtown immediately began to change and began to feel a lot more alive, a lot more of a excitement, new ways of looking and dealing with things. And as John said, the energy started to spread out in the city. You have the Hatch Gallery in the North End. You have the Kilburn Mill, which has been totally renovated. So those institutions are going to start to affect their neighborhoods as well. But the Star Store was very, very critical. It was the capstone of downtown revitalization. And a lot of people, a lot of younger people probably think that the downtown was always like this. It wasn't. As John knew from way back, there were times when you didn't want to walk into the historic district, what's now the historic district, during the daytime. It was so rough and tumble. And now look at what has happened. But it took 50 years. And that's why I got so upset when I started reading your columns, Jack, about the Star Store closing down. I couldn't believe that this could happen after so much success over a 20-year period. Yes, the building's 100 years old, but 20 years ago, over $20 million went into the renovation of that building by one of the best contractors in the country, Suffolk Construction. They do exquisite work. Over 20 years, yes, the building has worn down. It certainly needs a new roof, but I don't believe that you have 20 or 30 or $50 million of work that has to be done right away. That just doesn't make sense when you look at the building. So I don't think the excuse of the 100-year-old building has any merit. And I don't think the excuse of declining art student enrollment has much merit. What John said.
Go ahead, Richard.
What John said about the university and the city is a definition of win-win. The city gets that beating heart of energy and vision, while the university will get more enrollment of art students because they all want to be here. They all want to be together. They want to be in a hip little community of art. And that's just win-win. You asked in your email, what would be a win-win? The win-win is getting the Star Store back downtown and having the university have a higher enrollment, because this will be such an attractive school of art.
Okay, so I have a chat message from Claudette Roy Vial reminding all that the Star Store, the College of Visual and Performing Arts, is a direct successor to the New Bedford Textile Institute and the Swain School of Design. So for those people who say that we're a research university, we don't have any connection to that anymore, that's not the way a lot of people from New Bedford see it. I want to go back to Mayor Bullard. Mayor Bullard, you were involved with the formation of the National Park in New Bedford and the rediscovery of the value of our historical buildings. A lot of this Star Store debate has been framed as about, oh, it's a matter of dollars and cents. It's too expensive. We can't afford it. I have some skepticism about some of the numbers that have been thrown around, 50 to 75 million all at once. But how would you respond to people who say that these old buildings, they're just too expensive to maintain? You have a lot of experience in that area.
Yes, as Richard said, I've saved a lot of old buildings, and I remember, when we were raising money for the Zeiterion, I think that people said, "Well, we'll support you, John, because you've never been wrong." that every building you tried to save, you saved. And you have to start with a question of not how much is it going to cost, but what's the value, and do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? And I think in your first column on this, Jack, if my memory's correct, Senator Mike Rodrigues asked the question of the university, do they want to be in downtown? And that still remains to me the most important question. And do they want to be in downtown? Now, if the answer to that question is yes, then there's a way to answer this question. And I couldn't agree more with Richard that this building doesn't need 75 million or whatever the latest number is that gets thrown around. It needs a new roof and maybe something else, but the numbers that you hear thrown around that it needs new windows and it needs $100 million are numbers thrown around by people who don't want to be in downtown. And they're using numbers to justify the fact that they don't want to be in downtown. If they do want to be in downtown, then the answer, it seems to me, is, well, who do you need to put in a room to solve this problem? Who do you need to put in a room? Well, you need the chancellor or the president of the university, Marty Meehan, whoever's calling the shots, and I don't know who that is. Let's give the chancellor the benefit of the doubt. You need the building owner because he owns the building, Paul Downey. And you need the people who provide the money, which is, someone from the Senate, someone from the House. And maybe you need the mayor, because I think the mayor is going to play an integral part in this before it's all over. And I think with that group of people in a room and with a commitment that we are going to solve this problem, you're going to find a way to solve the problem if everyone wants to solve the problem. And if there's good faith. Now, I've talked to everyone that I just mentioned. And I don't, I think a lot of people that I just mentioned want to find an answer to that. I'm not sure everybody that I just mentioned wants to find an answer, but I think practically everybody does. And I think there's an answer to this problem. I don't think money is what's holding it back. I do not think money is holding it back.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's something else going on here. Fallon, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you found out about UMass Dartmouth's program and how you decided to come all the way across country, because Mayor Lang has talked about we need to market this school because there aren't that many great artisan schools, particularly artisan schools around the country. So how you found out about UMass Dartmouth and how you decided to move your young son, your husband, you all moved here. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I actually had a friend who was in the program at UMass Dartmouth, and I was looking to switch schools. I was in a different graduate program, and I wanted to leave because I didn't feel supported there. And she said, come to this great school. It's in New Bedford. You're going to love it. It's by the water. You can get out of the desert. So I think that's how a lot of us come here. And I know we have a lot of international students this year. So this program is bringing in more people than just the US. We're bringing in people from Iran, from Turkey, from Arizona, from all across the state and across the world for this program, for the Star Tour. And if you ask any of them, and I have, they came here because they looked it up online. They looked up what New Bedford looked like. They saw what the Star Tour looked like, and they thought, yeah, that looks like a place I want to be in. A lot of us didn't even get to come see in person before we decided to come to school here. But what we saw online about the facilities that were there and all that made us choose to come here. And I think the Bed Bath & Beyond that we're in now, which is only a temporary 1-year lease, is nowhere near what any of us signed up for.
other facilities, you're in ceramics, the kilns, are those unusual? You can't get them everywhere? I can't believe they didn't bring
Yeah.
it with you, so.
A lot of programs maybe will have one gas kiln, not as many as we had here for sure. So I think the facilities were a major part. And the other thing that was really great about the Star Store is that all the majors were able to work together. So yes, I was in ceramics, but if I wanted to go learn to use a loom, which a lot of programs do not have fibers and textiles, I could just go down the elevator and do that. If I wanted to work with printmaking, that's on another floor. Wood shop, that's in the basement. So the Star Store created like this community of artists. And I think that's why a lot of us came here, was for that.
Jack, can I step in and respond a little bit to what Fallon is saying? And one of the questions that was raised by a member of the audience had to do with commitments about Swain School. And that's some of the reason why those kilns and fiber arts and others all exist in one place. And that has to do with the history of the programs that now exist at UMass Dartmouth. And it started before the Star Store, when Swain School acquired the program in artisanry from Boston University. President John Silber at Boston University wanted to get rid of the program in artisanry, which was a internationally known program, really important, high quality artists housed at Boston University. And Bruce Yenawin, the president of Swain School, said, "Oh, we are going to grab that." And the program in artisanry came to Swain. And that was ceramics and fiber arts and woodworking and so on, integrated, came down to Swain. And a year or two after that, Swain so-called merged with UMass Dartmouth. Actually, it was acquired by UMass Dartmouth, and all of that ended up in the Star Store. So as Fallon described, this integrated program, that was the result of program and artisanry going to Swain, and then the two of them merging in with UMass Dartmouth. So you have Fallon's a ceramicist. You have people like Chris Guston, world famous ceramicist, who is now has his kilns, in Russell's Mills. You have some amazing artists in this region who are descendants of that movement from program and artisanry to Swain to UMass Dartmouth, who are still in this region and who are resources. It's a legacy. I mean, you can say it's a legacy that goes back to Bierstadt and Ryder and, 150, 200 years in New Bedford, that's always had the highest quality artists here in this city. And people are drawn to this city, people like Fallon. I'm so glad you're here, Fallon. And it is devastating that the university is taking you're giving you a bath, and it is beyond despicable what is happening to you with going from an environment like the Star Store in downtown New Bedford, an absolutely superlative environment in which you can create, and saying, well, instead of this environment, wouldn't you like a closed Bed Bath and Beyond in a mall?
And you can't even get into
You
that.
can't make that up. You cannot make that up.
And you can't even get into the Bed Bath and Beyond. I do want to pick up a little bit on what Fallon just said about the synergies between all the different programs, the printmaking, the sculpture, the painting, the weaving. It really is something for those of you who have not been upstairs in the Star Store. You can go from one major to another in these big windows overlooking the harbor, and you see the artists working in their studios, and the synergies between. I had one person tell me, he actually was from Montana, say that he goes from ceramics to weaving to painting because he's interested in all of it, and it's all right there in one program. I just want to welcome former Mayor Scott Lang, who has joined us. Welcome, Scott. We're having a great discussion about, how we got to where we are in the Star Store, the history of the Star Store, and where we go from here. I know you were involved in the negotiations to merge the UMass Dartmouth with the Swain School of Design. I wonder if you can talk about that history that just seems to have been thrown over in a matter of 2 weeks, and your thoughts on that.
Be happy to do that. Also, I want to just tell you, I was in court, and that's why I wasn't on, because I think this is a very, very important discussion, and I'm happy to lend whatever my experience and history was regarding Swain. I represented Swain School of Design. Probably started somewhere around 1982, representing Swain, doing different personnel work with them and contract work. And it became very clear by the mid 80s that Swain, which represented this corridor where my office is, but basically from Orchard Street down all the way to Washington Street with different buildings, that Swain needed to begin to think about either merging with someone or changing its method of operation in order to continue to survive in the, in a very, very competitive academic institution competition that existed at that time. Swain was a top 10, especially in different areas, specifically in painting, watercolors, and oil, sculpture, art school in the country, and very, very well known in the Northeast, and was about 100 years old by the time we reached mid-1980s. What happened was BU, out of the blue, BU built this tremendous MFA program. And Silver was the president at the time, John Silver. And he met Bruce Yenowin, who was the president at that time, at an event. And Silver said, I am in dire need of more space here for BU. And I have this feeling that we probably shouldn't be in the art school arena. And I'm kind of looking for a suitor. And the most unusual relationship developed because Swain was a school of about 100 kids and BU is this massive university. And they had spent a ton of money, millions of dollars, putting together this MFA and having it approved by the Department of Higher Education. And Swain became the natural school to merge or to give its MFA program to give it, I think it was $1. So the documents, but I think it was $1. It was millions of dollars worth of equipment, which eventually made its way to the Star Store, which was looking for a purpose. The Star Store became a major arts school. Star Store went from a department store to a more of a lower end department store when I think whoever it was that picked it up, one of these chain type of outfits picked it up. And then it became an art school and it built as an art school. And the equipment that went to Swain was the equipment that came from BU, but it had to stop first. And the stop first was on Purchase Street as a result of the mayor, and the mayor I'm talking about is Mayor Bullard, allowed the old SMU, SM Tech, whatever it was called, building to be outfitted by Swain School, and Swain paid for it, and the city helped with logistics, but Swain paid for it, put its last dollars into building this MFA program, which had leather, it had textiles, it had steel, in other words, elements, jewelry making.
So Mayor Lang, if I might just interrupt a minute, how would you respond to the university officials who say that was then, this is now, that the 1980s, it was more of a touchy-feely era, everybody wanted to major in the arts, a downtown school, an old building, we can't afford it. How would you respond to them saying that was then, it's outdated?
Well, first of all, it's always that was then, but the fact is that it's more, it seems to me art schools are flourishing all over the country if they market themselves, if they recruit, and if they keep up to date. So someone had said to me, and I'll finish that story in a minute, Jack, but someone had said to me recently, well, we need more graphic arts. Well, then put it in the curriculum. I'm sure that every art school in this country builds its curriculum around what the latest now is versus what was then. we're probably not creating things with sealing wax right now at an art school. We're probably doing things that are much more modern. But we've had artists amongst us since the earliest days of civilization, let alone, New Bedford. So the idea that was then means that you've decided you don't want to be part of now. And that's the key to it. But what I was going to say is that the mayor, and he makes me call him the mayor, but the mayor said, let's improve Swain's campus. We'll move over this MFA program. Yenowin, who is a genius in his own right, a great guy, really nice guy, very, very bright, began then talking with John Brazil, the president of SMU, which was about to become UMass Dartmouth. What would it look like if we merged Swain into the new UMass Dartmouth? And they realized that it'd be fantastic, because what it would do is keep the Swain School in New Bedford, keep the Swain School and the BU faculty, which was powerhoused, under the same roof, merge it into the university, where we would have a lot more resources and have a footprint in New Bedford. Now, the great thing was, as we do in New Bedford all the time, you had to make a choice. Were we going to spend a lot of money and time and try and figure out what we were going to do with, in essence, what became the Quest Center? Or are we going to take this and repurpose the Star Store and have it become the art school, basically an art university, an MFA type building, literally finest equipment in the country. It was from BU. And that's what was decided. So when that merger happened, I didn't think it was a temporary merger, Jack. I didn't think it was something where when they no longer need an art school or want an art school or want to keep it up to date. Swain had become a name in its own right, a brand. We moved that over to SMU / now UMass Dartmouth. The idea now that they say, well, we've made a decision to do something else. Then they should have said, we need now to take the Swain and the Swain MFA by way of BU and transfer it to somebody else, because it wasn't merged so that they could kill it. And if you move it out of downtown New Bedford, at the very least, it's going to really hurt New Bedford. And unless you build the facility somewhere appropriately, you need to build a new art school.
Okay.
That's the key.
And that brings me to a little bit of news here. I have learned over the past couple of days, and Fallon, you'll know about this, that the bulk of materials from the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth Star Store are sitting in trailers in the parking lot where the old dorms were torn down at UMass Dartmouth. They have no place to put them. So they not only did they put you in a Bed Bath & Beyond, which is not configured to work for you, but they don't have the space on the campus to put all the materials that were taken out of the Star Store, unless they're going to build by next year or January another whole addition onto the CVPA building in Dartmouth. All that material is just sitting in trailers, which I also heard were even unlocked. I haven't verified that last part of it, but all these materials were sitting in there. Can you tell us, Fallon, a little bit about that move and where things are?
So yeah, I mean, if we're not talking like about all the stuff that they threw away, like all the equipment, kilns, tables, all that was thrown away during the move, a lot of the stuff was put into long-term storage, which is the trailers you're discussing. And then the rest of it is still wrapped up in the Bed Bath & Beyond, because they don't have the proper permits to get electrical set up. So we don't even have the most basic necessities at the Bed Bath & Beyond. So that's essentially just another storage unit for the equipment that they don't have room for on the main campus. And the undergrads that were put in the main campus, the ones they were able to get in there from painting and drawing, they're shoved together with 2 other classrooms. They have no room to walk in there. They've told me they can barely work. And so there's no room already just with the few undergrads that they were able to fit in there. And they're saying they're going to put an entire 4-story building in there. It doesn't make any sense, unless they have some hidden area of the CVPA that they're going to unveil all of a sudden.
Okay, so hint, hint, we're approaching midterms. The students still haven't gotten into their studios. They need a lawyer. Hint, hint, I'm not to put you on the spot, Scott, but they need some help getting a lawyer from somewhere. I want to talk, we'll wrap up after an hour, so I want to get in a couple of things that I think are important, and then I'll give you all an opportunity to wrap up. I learned this week that the commitment of UMass Dartmouth to the downtown campus has never been full-throated. They had a pilot program where they gave the students the ability to get their meals with a voucher at the downtown lunch spots, and they took that away after a year, ostensibly because the food vendor on the Dartmouth campus objected to it. Then you had never given free parking in this adjacent Zeitarian garage during the daytime hours to the students. So it was difficult for them to get parking in the downtown. And they never worked out a shuttle that ran often enough to get people between the classes on the Dartmouth campus and the New Bedford campus. Can you speak to the commitment, Fallon, a little bit about,
Yeah, we feel like there's not really been much of a commitment, especially right now. They're saying that they're going to reevaluate our numbers at the end of the year, and that's how they're going to move forward with their commitment to us. But who's going to want to stay in a program where the university won't even let you make art? And I think I came in 2 years ago, and I started seeing that all the faculty that retired wasn't being hired back. So I think that UMass for a while has not been maintaining commitment to the community, to the students, or to the faculty who they're supposed to be serving.
Yeah. Richard, you're a professional planner. I want to ask you if you could draw on your experience in planning and management of government agencies as to what is going on here. And I don't know whether UMass Dartmouth just isn't telling us everything, but how does this stack up in terms of good management, good public policy, things like that?
Well, I'll take it from the issue of, is Star Store a good building to stay in? John mentioned, it is an old building, but 20 years ago, Suffolk Construction came in there and really addressed some of the critical deficiencies of that building. There were structural issues, roof, the exterior walls, the windows, all of that was addressed. Those items, well, I know that they need work with the roof. You can either patch the roof or you can replace it all at once. I don't know how many holes there are, but I did see some pictures of problems with the roof. So we know the roof needs to be done, but that's not 50 million. That's not 30 million. You talk about the building being old, but it was totally renovated and brought up to code only 20 years ago. So this building has not deteriorated all that much. And when I read that maybe it's 30 million, maybe it's 70 million, and you can't get a report of the deferred maintenance, better part of my career was dealing with deferred maintenance at the New Bedford Housing Authority. When I walked in the door, they gave me a report that said there was $120 million of deferred maintenance. That didn't mean that everything had to be done at once. You have maintenance items that have to be done immediately. Then there's midterm type of things that need to be done. And then there's stuff that's desirable, but not necessarily critical to the operation. In 19 years, 3,500 units. We only took 12 units out of commission for about 2 years because they were clearly not, you couldn't occupy them. So you can't tell me that the Star Store, after being totally renovated 20 years ago, is so deficient now because it's an old building. It's been renovated and brought up to code. And I just don't see how you can walk away from a building because of deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance can be handled adequately without having to abandon the building. We did it at the Housing Authority with public housing units, which are always very worn and need a lot of attention. So from my career in planning in public housing, I see the Star Store as a gem. And it was a gem because the state came in and made a commitment, and they picked a wonderful contractor who did great work. That building is ready to be reoccupied, save the repair of the roof. I just don't believe the storyline that's been thrown out there about why they have to get out of this old building in the downtown. It just
I
doesn't make
agree.
sense.
A lot of it looks like a decision in search of a rationale from their storyline. I wonder if I could go back to Mayor John Bullard. Mayor Bullard, you're very close to the politics of things. I know that you are well connected, not just at the city level, but on the state level. It seems like the governor has had very little to say on this. Even Senator Montigny and Mayor Mitchell have been rather quiet lately. Maybe there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. What are you hearing on the politics of this, and is it over? Because some people, I know State Representative Markey say it's over, but what are you hearing about the politics of it?
I don't think it's over, but that may be my hopefulness. I know the mayor is still working on this. I think the key is what the university feels about this. I know when I've talked to the chancellor, he talks about the deferred maintenance on campus, and clearly, that is an issue, but it is an issue that is separate from whether or not the university should be a presence in downtown. And I really believe that someone, and perhaps it's the mayor, perhaps it's the chancellor, if the chancellor wants to be in downtown New Bedford, needs to get the key players in a room to say, how are we going to solve this problem? Because I think if there's a desire to solve the problem, the resources will flow. There are resources available. The state has money. The mayor has money through ARPA. And the old building, the Empire State Building's 100 years old. No one is saying we should tear that building down or we shouldn't use it. The White House, the Capitol, Beacon Hill. There are a lot of buildings that are 100 years old that people still occupy and are still very useful. This is really about whether the university wants to be in downtown New Bedford. It's a very important issue. And as important as it is about the arts in New Bedford, it's also a larger issue about, is the university an isolated ivory tower with no connections to southeastern Massachusetts, or is it connected to Fall River and New Bedford? The communities that I think it serves. That, and shouldn't that debate be held in public as you were doing, Jack? Or is this just an edict that Mark Fuller or Marty Meehan gets to decide on their own? This is a public university. And for the UMass Dartmouth to pull away from the city of New Bedford, to pull away from the city of Fall River and say, we're not going to have anything to do with, the life of downtown New Bedford and the implications of that decision on future relationships by itself without any civic discussion, that seems profoundly wrong.
I wonder if we can wrap up with Mayor Lang. Mayor Lang, nobody I know in New Bedford is closer to the pulse of the people than you. You have always known what people are talking about. You have always been the greatest listener I know. You taught at the university for a long time. What are your thoughts about where we've gotten to, and what I don't know whether it's a blockage or just sort of a lack of communication. What is going on here, and what do you think can be done to break through?
Well, first, I'd say don't give UMass Dartmouth, the Empire State Building. And I hadn't thought of that, John, but you're exactly right. The key, I think, on this is that there's not stability at the university. And the university doesn't understand that the sum of the parts equals a great whole. So the reason kids want to go to the university is because it has a rural suburban type campus, but it's also in between two major cities, two major mid-sized cities in this state and around the country. And they develop niches. So SMAS is a niche. The art school and the MFA was a niche. If they don't understand that that promotes the university, eventually we'll figure this out. Star Store will not become the Keystone building. But the fact of the matter is, it was built as an art school. It is the center of the creative economy, which has led to tremendous growth in downtown. It's vibrant, it's vital, it brings young people in, smart people who look at our city and will be the next future planners, the next leaders, but also it gives the boom to the entire area. It is a major mistake. Now, why did it happen, Jack? It happened because there's more deferred maintenance for every building out in Dartmouth than there ever will be at the Star Store. I mean, you just go out there. If you want to study rebar and what happens after 40 years, you can easily go out there and look at that and do that study. The fact of the matter is that this was, as you said, a rationale, okay, that a decision that was in search of a rationale. This has got to do with communication. You need to get the governor and all the different principals, the mayor, the two senators, our delegation together with the owner right now, who is Downey, who somehow still owns the building instead of DeCamp saying buy that thing, and come up with a program, a deal that preserves the art school and then preserves the Star Store under the state auspices. Until you do that, the Star Store will be in free fall. If it needs $70 million worth of deferred maintenance, no one's going to turn it into a high-end condo. No one's going to anyway. If you know the Star Store, you understand that the cheapest way to renovate the Star Store is to knock it down and start from scratch. You don't do that in New Bedford, period. The number one guy who stands for that is the mayor. You don't knock stuff down in New Bedford. We are original. We're not fiberglass. We're mahogany. We have a tremendous franchise around the world. We don't start knocking down our principal buildings. It was built 20 years, 25 years, as Dick said, as a art school. If it needs maintenance, then do it. If the person who should have done the maintenance didn't, sue him. But the idea that Montigny fell over a tripwire and these guys all then said, we're leaving. What was said in the beginning on this thing by Fallon is exactly right. They started divesting from the Star Store when they weren't recruiting, they weren't doing the PR, they weren't rehiring country known, worldwide known faculty. They started letting things. She told me a story that the kilns, because of the water on the leaks that they were able to contain with buckets, but because of drips, they blew out electrical circuits. The first time they saw that, they should have sat down and had a meeting and said, this is a crisis. We can't have kids walking around with miner hats on working up here. First of all, it's too dangerous. Secondly, it's too precise. It's too expert in what they're doing here. This is not me making a ashtray or an elf at Christmas for my mom and bringing it home. These are world-renowned artists, and we have shut the door on them by allowing an unstable university system with intransient leaders coming into our area and telling us what's good for us. I am tired of people treating us like a colony. We actually talk about parts of the whole. We're one of the reasons Massachusetts is as good as it is, and it has the history it does. Let's make our own decisions. The Star Store should be part of the university, just like they came in and said, we need more land for SMAS. The answer was, it's got to be in New Bedford. It's got to be properly maintained, properly staffed, and it has to have a purpose. Otherwise, why would we give you land, or why would they allow you in the city? If UMass doesn't want to be in here, then they should have said, we've got to find another university who would like to inherit a major art school that was basically built 20, 25 years ago with an MFA. Getting an MFA is worth as much as the Star Store. So my answer to this is everybody get in a room, fight it out, get it done, and get it open. If you don't get in a room, it will go into free fall. People's attention will be drawn away from it, and eventually you're going to be in real crises mode. The longer any building in New Bedford stays vacant, the longer it has the potential of either melting or firing itself up. And we don't want that. So I think it's great you're doing this, Jack, but the pressure's got to be on. I think the kids are doing it, but the pressure's got to be on. I would not pay tuition. I also would start saying the MFA's got to be taken away. Give it to somebody who's serious about it. Give them all the equipment. Swain didn't do this to say, well, give a good run with UMass Dartmouth for 25 years, and then Swain's 140-year history, or whatever it is now, 140 years, goes down the wayside. I mean, Swain, the legacy of Swain was moved to, by the way, through the auspices of the AG's office, was moved to the university, which was SMU, then UMass Dartmouth. The idea that they then decide one day, we don't really need an art school, that's not the way this works. So that's my message on this is New Bedford's more important, and the Star Store is more important to the university than them simply saying, well, you don't need it anymore, and we're not going to be in that business anymore. You don't get to close down that franchise.
All right, well, we're about 10 minutes over our time. I want to
That's
thank
my
all
fault,
of you. You've been great. I really think we need to keep this discussion going, and more needs to come out as to what exactly is happening up there. Thank you to former Mayor John Bullard, former Mayor Scott Lang, former City Planner Richard Wallinger, and most of all, Fallon Navarro, the courageous student who has led the student effort up at UMass Dartmouth. Thank you very much. This is Jack Spillane on the chat.
You.
Thank
Good night.
you.